Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Perdue, and I am a nerd, and this is the April 2013 Tabs3 PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting. I say Tabs3 PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting, which is the way it's always been. So I suppose now is as good a time as any to announce that starting in June, we will have a Tabs3 Virtual User Group Meeting and separately a PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting. Some of you know that we've also started on the second Monday of each month having a World Docs virtual user group meeting. These two, the Tabs3 VUG as we call them, and the PracticeMaster VUG, will be continue to be on the last Monday of the month. And I guess we haven't made any strict decisions yet, but I'm thinking that one will start at 1, and it'll probably be the Tabs3, and we will have the other one start at 2 o'clock. And it'll be the PracticeMaster Virtual User Group Meeting. Gives you a chance to eat lunch in between and come back. Today we are talking about customizing the way that the task list behaves and prints and displays in PracticeMaster. And Mary Jo will be covering that topic in just a moment. And I'm going to talk about the last bastion of how your bills look. We've talked before about how to use the layout designer to control the top and the bottom of the bills. We've talked about using templates to control the middle of the bills. I'm going to talk about statement customization, which is the last place you can go to affect how your bills look. Now, before we get started with that, a little bit of preamble here. You probably have something that looks a little bit like this over on the right of your screen, and it may be in this fully expanded view, meaning that it may be partially covering up my screen. And so these buttons out here will help you to control that. And this one at the top that looks like an arrow pointing to the right, if you press that, it will cause this to go away. Once you press that, and once this goes away, these three buttons will still be accessible, but this one will then change to arrows that point to the left, and pressing it again will cause this to slide out to the left and be viewable again. This is how you raise your hand. So if you're feeling not shy, then you can press this little button that looks like a hand with an arrow pointed upward in front of it, and you will raise your hand. Leanne will diligently watch for people who have raised their hands, and when it's appropriate, she will announce your question, unmute you, let you ask it, let you get it fully answered, and then she'll mute you back up so you can continue eating lunch. If you are feeling shy, then you'll want to use this button to get this thing exposed again, because here is where you can type your questions, which Leanne will read on your behalf. So without further ado, I'm going to switch this over to PracticeMaster, and we are going to turn things over to Mary Jo, who's going to talk about the task list. Now be sure, if you have a question, be sure you ask a question that causes her to have to repeat the words task list, because they're very difficult, and she's worried that she's going to mess them up. Mary Jo?
Wow, that was an intro. Well, I'm going to talk about the task list, and what we're going to do is show you a couple of ways to customize how that looks. So the first thing that I'm going to do is show you when you're in your calendar view, down at the bottom, some of you can see this one, it's not, you can't see my task list. Normally our tasks show up down here at the bottom underneath our calendar, whether it's monthly view, daily view, whatever. So a lot of times I'll have clients call and say they can't see that down here. Well, you'll see if I get this little double line, I can pull that up a little bit and shrink my calendar view, and then my task list then appears down at the bottom. So if you're not seeing it underneath your calendar and you want to, you can just pull that up, and you can make this as large as you want. It does shrink your calendar view a little bit, but you can see all of your tasks. The next thing that I have people tell me is that they want to change what information is showing on these columns. And just like any of our other screens where we have columns, we can customize our column view. So to me, when I come in, I don't, if I'm already the user and I know that I'm looking at my calendar, if I were to change this to, in my test data, to Cheryl, I would already know who the user was and the user ID, because I'm on Cheryl's calendar. Now, if you are an administrator and you are monitoring, or an attorney monitoring your staff, and you need to see all of their tasks, then maybe this user group or user ID is something that you want to see who that task is assigned to. So it's a personal preference. But a lot of times what people want to see down here is what client this is associated with. A lot of times out of the box it just has the client ID, and a lot of us don't remember what that client ID and who that corresponds to. So we want to see that client name, and then take it a little bit further, we also want to see that description so we know what matter it is. So it's very easy to customize this column layout by right-clicking on that top tab. I'm just up here at the top of this, the columns. I right-clicked, and then there's a Manage Column Layouts. And I can click on that, and then I can go in and I can manage my task list. Now, I want to show you here that right out of the box, everybody has a default task list. And it's here in the parentheses. It's called task_list. This is kind of the default. If you modify this one, you modify this for everyone. If you want to create a new column layout for just you, because maybe you like to see certain fields, but Susie down the hall likes to see other ones, you would actually create a new column layout, and then I'll show you where you can go to change that so that's the view that you see. But if you want to modify the task list across the board, you can modify this task_list because this is the default. So if I click on that and I click on my edit, actually I just clicked, I didn't have to click my edit, but there's a little pencil and paper up there to edit it. You can see all of the available columns that you could put in there, and then here are the ones that are over here. And right now this particular task list view does have the client ID in the description, but it does not, and this description here is not the matter description, that's the calendar or the task description. So you have to be careful there. So if I come down here, I can see I've got client names, so I can add that to the list. And then if I go down just a little bit further, you can see that there's a client work description. And that's what I want to put over here, because that's the description from the matter. And then you can change the order of those columns simply by moving these up and down. So I can put this up here closer to the top. I can also put my work description closer to the top. I can remove any columns that I don't want to see. If you don't need the complete date or the due date, you can take those off and add anything over here that you'd like. Once I get that done and I save it, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. And now if I was using that particular task list, which I believe in my properties I am not, this would change. So if it doesn't change right away, that means that you have a different underneath, I was modifying the task_list. This also has some different ones that have already been put in there that are specific for certain users. So to get the correct list to show, I can go right-click again and go to my properties. And on this task list, I knew I was going to do it. Paul put that in my head. I knew I was going to mess it up. The user lookup is the column layout that is the preferred task list layout for this user. But I can change it back to my task list right here, say OK, and now you can see that I've got my client name, my client work description, and then the date completed, and I've done that. So just changing it by right-clicking and managing my column layouts might not necessarily change the task list here until I change it in my properties and choose that particular one. And you can create as many of these as you like. You can see they have a user lookup. They've got a client info one. You can create one with the initials of each user if they each have a different one. Some firms like to lock that down a little bit more and have that be one task list that everybody sees. So that's, again, it's a preference of your firm, but you can modify this. Now, I am going to go back into those properties real quick. So again, I'm right-clicking, and I'm just going to properties, because there's a couple of other selections here that you can do to modify what you're seeing here on your task list. So I am in my task list view. I can use my my sorting. I'm just doing on the tasks only, but when you're on the task list, that's what you're looking at. But the selection criteria is important. Some people like to see just all their incomplete tasks. Other people might want to see the incomplete tasks for a selected day, just the ones that are incomplete that have a due date of today. Others want to see all the overdue tasks or there might be times when you want to see all the completed tasks. And you may yourself flip through these and see different views throughout your day. Maybe at the beginning of the day you want to see all of your overdue tasks, which is going to give you everything that's incomplete and whether it's overdue or not. Or at the end of the day you might want to see everything that you've completed. So that is another option when in the properties to go back and forth and see what you're doing. And you also can include or not include the tasks with no due date. So those are where you find those settings. Now I'm not just changing these and applying it here at the bottom of my calendar. I'm also changing it on my task list view. And if you go into your calendar, there is just a task list. So if you don't want to see it in correspondence with your calendar, you can just click on that task list, and again you can see that my columns followed me over here because I'm using that default task list view, and I can print this task list or do whatever I want to do here with this, and I can change this view in my properties, and it's very easy without having to go out to find my calendar, go into my calendar properties. I get it right from the screen, and just by right clicking, go into my properties, I might want to see just all my completed tasks, and then I get that. I can switch it very easily back to just seeing all my overdue tasks and so on. Now be careful if you are just looking at your overdue task or your incomplete tasks for the selected day. I know that a lot of people like to use this, but if you're not pushing those days out, let's say that yesterday you didn't complete a task and you didn't change the date, it will not show up on this list because you're only seeing the incomplete tasks for today. And so if last week you didn't complete some things, they could fall through the cracks if you're not pushing that date out and changing it to a date that's this week so that you can see it. So be careful using that selected day. It is fast and it does show you just what what's due today, but be careful if you've missed something. I like to show all of my incomplete, and I believe I also go back and forth between that and my overdue task because I want to see if it's overdue. So, but those are some selections there that you can have. Any questions? No questions. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Paul then, and he's going to talk about statement customization.
Very nice. Me being the taskmaster, you can thank your lucky stars that you had Mary Jo to explain that to you because I'd just be starting to talk. We're going to look at statement customization and the options that are available there. But before we do that, I want to take you into this part of the program and show you that it is the Statements tab, and then within the Statements tab, the Statement Setup button that gets you here, and it gets you to where you can see these 6 icons that represent things you can do in Statement Setup. We're going to look at this, Statement Customization. We have talked before about Statement Designer. That's where you go to do the layouts, and as you can see, we can have a whole bunch of different layouts and even different groups of layouts. I just have the sample layouts, but some firms will have layouts for one partner versus layouts for another partner, or one type of law, or one insurance company, whatever the case may be. And these are all different ways that you can set up the way that your bills are going to look on the top and the bottom. Now, what's important to note here is that you can have a lot of these. You can have them for this circumstance and that circumstance. And when you set up a matter, you're on this part about templates because I believe we got through where we had looked at the layout designer and we were talking about templates and the fact that you can have many of them. They define how the middle of your bill looks. And so you can have one that defines how a bill is going to look for criminal versus one that defines how a bill is going to look for probate, which may be different than estate planning, which may be different than the way Bob likes his bills to look, and there may be 2 insurance companies that have other ways that they want their bill to look. These are multiple in nature. In other words, you can have multiple templates, you can have multiple layouts with different types of things at the top and the bottom of the bill. This, which is what we're talking about today, is singular in nature. This is statement customization, and it is where we define. It's kind of the final frontier of the exact language that appears on the bill. We're looking at the Options tab, and I'm going to end here because it's got a lot to explain. I'm just going to very quickly tell you that you can determine what your months look like. If you'd rather have DEC with a capital D, capital E, capital C, you could change that. This is how you determine what language you use on the cover statement. If you don't like the fact that on the cover statement it says previous balance and you want to say balance from prior statements instead, this is where you go to change that. You have a checkbox that allows you to determine whether or not the client account IDs show on the cover statements. The client account ID is that left part of the decimal if you're using them in the format. So if you have a client who might have a matter that looks like 8901.1234, the 8901 is the client account ID. That's the client part. Here are your headings. We're going to come back to that in a second. Here's the rest of the terminology that appears on the bill. Now you'll notice some of it's underlined. Some of it is bolded. When you actually get into editing them, your bold, italic, and underlined buttons become active. And so you can do that. You can have bolded, you can have underlined, and you can have italicized text that appears here. Now there are a couple things that also appear here, some of these options. And in order to explain them, I'm going to show you very quickly something I like to show people all the time, which is context-sensitive help. When I'm in this screen, if I press the yellow question mark, I will get help about the terminology tab in the statement customization section because that's what I'm on. And therefore, if I decide that I'd like to know a little bit more about these options that appear here, I would go to the line I'm on, line 22, click this link, and among other things, it's going to tell me what these options are. So what it's telling me here is that I can insert the statement dates, the beginning fee date, and the ending fee date directly into this description just by doing this. Oops. This would replace this, if I had a statement date of today, this would replace this with total credits for fees on 4/29/2013. Very helpful when you are having your note at the beginning that tells what the date range for the statement is, or perhaps you want payments received through or anything like that. Now, some of these lines have these options. Some of them don't, and you'll see as you scroll through them which ones have these options and which don't. And sometimes you'll see new options that we just didn't see just now. So if we go to help and get to line 25 here, we'll find out that this /L, for instance, means that the heading will print left justified. The E, for instance, which we hadn't seen before, was the ending cost date. So as you know, when you print statements, you can specify beginning and ending date for fees and costs and payments. So this is what's going on here and what these options mean. Now we also have some special lines. For instance, if we look at line 27, which by the way says procedures because I showed this to somebody the other day and changed it. It normally, I believe, would say advances. So let's do that. Let's change it back to advances, and we want it to be 28 is total advances, right? And 28 is advances. Mary just assuming that I'm wrong because I'm a man. You should have heard her in the car the other day when we were trying to get from Lincoln to the Omaha airport. Oh my gosh. Anyways, advances, total advances. If we look at line 27, we'll notice that we are able, if we go into help, and look at line 27, we are able to actually, well, line 27 is options and line 28 is combined. Okay, yes. You know what? She's right, and she's laughing now.
I have to say it, you know, I'm right.
Yes, we know that. Here we go. Enter only an asterisk in this line if you want expense and advances combined into one total on the statement. So there are a couple things that show up in here, in this section, this terminology section, that allow you to actually have control over combining certain totals or how certain things act on the bill. So it would be probably good advice to come in here, click on this context-sensitive help, move around here, and be able to see exactly what your options are. But one that I can tell you right now is that if you put an asterisk in line 28 instead of anything else, it'll look at that and say, oh, they want us to print expenses and then advances, but then total both of them together. Okay? Now, go back to headings. Headings is where we are able to, in older copies of the program, older versions of the program, put our firm information at the top of a bill. Now, most of us know that you can actually override this nowadays in the current 16.2 version of the software and have, you know, headings at the top of your bill that have all sorts of different fonts and pen and ink drawings of your building and all sorts of information. This is the old way of doing it. So it's worth your while if you come in here or think that you've got this situation and come in here to verify it and find that you've got your heading information in here, because there's no flexibility here. This will basically print whatever is on these 3 lines or 9 lines plus this message at the end. These lines will be centered at the top of the bill, and this line here will be, these lines here or this paragraph here will appear at the bottom. So if you have something in here, it's worth your while to consider making your bills look better. If you don't have anything in here and you're still printing your bills on letterhead, you also might consider simply replicating the letterhead. Make something in the Statement Layout Designer that looks exactly like your letterhead, so your bills can print on blank copy paper and still look like they're coming out on letterhead.
And Paul, I'm just going to interject just really quick. That actually changed in version 14. So if you have anything in here that, you know, as you updated and updated, you know, from 14 to 15 to 16, it would automatically just carry these headings forward, and it wouldn't, you know, prompt you to change it. It could go back farther than that. So don't think just because you're on 16 or 15 that you know, you just missed it. It's been going on for a while, and people have just kind of kept that information in the headings and not realized we have other options that are better now. So it's just worth looking at.
Exactly. When you update from 12 to 14 or from 14 to 15, whenever, it assumes that you want to keep everything the way it is, and so it does just that, even though there's a newer, better way to do these. And so if you've let that happen, then you've experienced a situation where you're just using it the old way. Now, if we go over to options, a couple things here. We have the position of the previous balance. We have the non-billable hours. We have the courtesy discount position. So if you want your, it'll fall to the top of the statement, but if you want your position to appear, or your previous balance to appear after fees and costs or after total current work, you can select that here. With non-billable hours, you can select to print them. We do. They come out with a little NC to indicate no charge. And you can also tell it to print both printable and non-printable. I don't advise that. If you have something that's in there as a non-billable, non-printable entry, you probably don't want it to print. And then where does the courtesy discount go? That's something that not many of our clients use, but if you're using it, you can determine, now Mary Jo's shaking her head, some people do, you can determine of these 3 options where it goes. This is the number of lines if you are combining statements. Now, if you're not, this doesn't apply, but if you're combining multiple matters into one statement using the combined statements option, this determines how many lines go between those statements, between those matters. And you can also put a P in here and have it start each bill on a new page. Now, why would you want to have a P in there and start each bill on a new page? Well, that's the same as printing them as separate matters, except that when you're combining them, you can print one PDF that looks like you didn't combine them into one. It still prints each matter on a separate page. You can double space between each fee transaction. You can double space fees in a summary fee file format. You can print credits on invoice format statements. I have a lot of insurance defense firms that are starting to do this. That means that when they do something, it will, credit-wise, it will show up even though most of their insurance companies are being built in an invoice format that does not include payments and does not include previous balances. This means that you can still exclude payments and previous balances from showing up on a bill, yet you can also have the credits there nonetheless. Another is printing finance charge on invoice format statements. I don't see that quite so often because most of the firms that are billing in invoice format are billing people that are dictating that they not be charged finance charge. You can have it print the blank miscellaneous lines. There is a work description and 3 miscellaneous lines that are determined on a matter-by-matter basis. Usually those lines will print at the top of the bill if they have something in them, and there will be no blank space if a line is empty. This simply says, go ahead and print blank space if that line is empty. Spell statement date on statements, just a matter of whether or not you want it looking like this or if you want it spelled out. Add current work to past due amounts if you have a past due history or a past due recapitulation at the bottom. Will your work in process be included in that 0 to 30 column? Combine all totals on statement. This is if you have the options set that tell the client that they need to pay so much into their client funds account or pay so much into their trust account plus they're being billed a certain amount. This will then take those 3 amounts that they would need and would add them together and give a kind of a grand total. And finally, do you want to print billable amounts of 0? If you have something with a 0 balance, do you want it to print 0? You know, telephone conference with and maybe you're logging 0.2 hours, but you've got an amount due of 0 because you've written it down to 0. Do you want it to print as blank, or do you want it to print the 0.00 to indicate and kind of accent the fact that you're not charging for that? Now, I know that even if we quizzed you right now, you guys would probably have trouble remembering what these all mean. So remember, come in here, use this yellow question mark once you get into the statement customization screen, and you'll get descriptions of all these things. If we go into statement customization, you can then click on, oops, I did this today. You go into, let's try that again. Go into help when you're on that screen, and then you start to click these tabs, which match up with these tabs to indicate which heading or which tab you want help on. And then you'll be able to see the exact descriptions of what these things do. You have a question about this print billable amounts of 0, click on that, and there it is. And with that, I will ask Leanne, are there any more questions? Okay.
I'm going to just add just real quick again, Paul, I'm sorry. The blank lines between combined statements, I see a lot of clients that will have like maybe 2 lines between every matter when they print their draft statements, but then when they send it out to the client, they'll come back in here and they'll change it before they do the final bills and make a page between each one just to save on paper when they're printing. So feel free, you can come in and do that. And then the other thing I just want to stress again too is, Paul, I mean, when you're doing the templates and the layouts, you can do several different versions of that, but remember that these changes affect all statements. This is a global change when you come into customization. It's not just, one type of statement or one template.
Exactly. And now we do have a question. Leanne? Okay, Judy, we're going to unmute you. What's your question? Judy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I don't have any questions.
Oh,
I'm good.
Judy raised her hand to tell us that she didn't have any questions. Thank you, Judy.
No, I put my hand down.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. Okay. Well, then we will thank you for being patient while we had our brief audio difficulty, and we will look forward to seeing you next month on the last, is it the last Monday of the month, Leanne? I think next month we have a holiday on the last Monday of the month, so we will be having the virtual user group meeting for Tabs3 and PracticeMaster a week early. Watch your email boxes on that prior Thursday, and we'll announce the topics. Or if you're really curious, as soon as the recorded version of today's is up, which should be, maybe Wednesday or Thursday of this week, then we'll also have the information on topics for next month, along with the registration link. Thanks very much, everybody, for stopping by, and we will see you again next month. Bye-bye.